Okay, well, we are starting the recording, and I'll go ahead and start the session then. I'm Cindy Rutz. I'm from the new group called CITL. We used to be Vital, and now we are the Center for Innovation in Teaching, Assessment, and Learning. And the team right now is myself doing faculty development, and Ed Finn, and Gina Rue. And Gina is here in our meeting with me. Ed wanted to be here today, but he's not feeling well. So anyway, so CITL put these together, but it's what matters is the faculty who will be presenting today. So this session is primarily focused on online tools that some faculty have found really useful in their classroom. So Mandy is going to talk about helping her students annotate the Bible using Perusall. Stan is going to talk about how he uses Top Hat. And Tiffany is going to talk about using online educational resources, OERs, in her classroom. So any one of you can begin. Just for the whole group, I think we have actually everybody was here in the last session. But I'll just remind you, we're going to spend the first bit with presentations by the three. Then the second bit, the three presenters will talk to each other. And then in the last part, it's open free for all for anybody to ask questions, either directly or via the chat. So take it away, who would ever like to go first?
I'm happy to go first if nobody else is volunteering.
Thanks, Tiffany.
All right. I'll go ahead and share my screen here. All right, can you see the screen okay? Looks good.
Yep.
All right. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Tiffany Kolba. I'm from the Department of Mathematics and Statistics. And so just to give a little bit of background, the Department of Mathematics and Statistics has made a commitment to reduce or eliminate the cost of textbooks and materials for our courses. And so over the last few years, we've been awarded multiple Open Educational Resource Development Awards from the library, and we've now transitioned almost all of our department's courses to using OERs. So there's many benefits to using OERs, but I would say probably the top two from our department's perspective is one, obviously it saves students money, but then also it helps prevent students from falling behind due to not purchasing the textbook. So I know my first few years teaching here before we switched to OERs, I would always have a few students mid-semester who had still not purchased the textbook. So by switching to OERs, it helps prevent them from falling behind since most of the homework problems used to be from the textbook. All right, so many of our math courses are using WebWork. WebWork is a free open source online homework system for STEM courses supported by the Mathematical Association of America and the National Science Foundation. So for our upper level courses, typically the instructor has the freedom to choose the textbook and resources, but for our 100 and 200 level courses, that is typically set by the department. So we do require WebWork for finite mathematics, all the various calculus courses, as well as ordinary differential equations. So WebWork is free, but the university does charge a $25 course fee to each student enrolled in these courses. And that fee helps to cover the direct cost of a stipend for a faculty WebWork coordinator, as well as the indirect cost of hosting WebWork on the Valpo servers. So $25 is pretty economical for the student, and yet it generates over $15,000 of revenue per year. And so it's much nicer having that revenue go to the university rather than to textbook publishers. So WebWork is used for the homework in these courses, but the courses would also use a free PDF as the textbook. And so I've included a link to WebWork at the bottom if you want to check it out. From the student perspective, they would access WebWork through a link in Blackboard. So the Blackboard link would take them directly to the WebWork problem sets that have been curated for their specific course. And from the instructor's perspective, you would have access to thousands and thousands of WebWork problems that have been developed. And so it's really easy for the instructor to simply pick and choose which problems they want to assign for their specific course. WebWork also allows instructors to write their own questions as well. So I think currently the math department is the only department using WebWork at Valpo, but I want to point out that there are WebWork problems developed for many other STEM disciplines besides math. Right, so I mentioned that a lot of our math courses are using free PDF textbooks, and at least within math, it's really easy to find a free PDF textbook for any level math course. Most of our students tend to be fine using an e-textbook, but there are always a few students who really want that physical copy. And so our department did purchase a spiral binding machine, and so if a student wants a physical copy, we can simply print and bind the PDF into a spiral bound textbook, and then we charge the student a $20 fee to cover the course of the materials for that printing and binding. So I do have an example here of a free PDF textbook that I use. And so let me get over to the screen. So this textbook I use for Math 451. That is real analysis. It's a proof-based course for math majors. And so using an e-textbook, I'm sure everybody's, aware there's many benefits of you can search for key terms in it. You have hyperlinks to take you to different sections. But one of the things that I wanted to point out about this particular textbook that I really like is that anytime a name of mathematician appears, so here is Taylor polynomials, which if you're not familiar with math, Taylor polynomials are a very important concept, but it's really easy to just click on the name of the mathematician and it takes you to a little history lesson. So there's just lots of nice benefits of using an e-textbook that you don't have the ability to do with a traditional published textbook. Right, so while most of our math classes are using free PDF textbooks, our statistics courses tend to not use any textbook at all. Rather, we have developed note outlines for most of our stat courses. And so the instructor provides hole punched outlines for each class session with space for students to take notes. And then students are encouraged to purchase a 3-ring binder to compile all of the class notes into a comprehensive reference for the course material. So I wanted to show you some examples of what a note outline would look like. So here is an example note outline for Stat 344-544. This is stochastic processes. This is a course that I taught this past spring semester. So typically at the top, I would have the agenda, the reminders, and then there are headings with space for the students to take notes. So there's headings for examples, headings for definitions, there's headings for theorems, etc. So I have found that using these note outlines really helps to increase the quality of the notes. Back when I would just, write things on the board and expect students to take notes on their own paper, typically the students' notes, a lot of them would be disorganized. They would forget to write important details. And so these note outlines really increase the quality of the notes, which is especially important since they're using this as a comprehensive reference in lieu of in lieu of having a textbook. So one tip that I would say is with using these note outlines, I do always hole punch them ahead of time. I think hole punching them ahead of time really helps to make sure the students are putting them into a 3-ring binder and keeping them organized. Just that little step I think is effective. If you don't pre-hole punch them, students tend to lose them. So this is the version that I distribute to the students. I just want to also show this is the completed version that I would use as the instructor. So I have like in red everything that I would write on the board. And so this really helps, from the instructor's perspective to stay organized and prepared for class. I really discourage, though, distributing the completed notes to students. I do think that it's important for students to fill in the notes themselves. So I think that the physical act of writing helps with the student comprehension and retention of the material. All right, so I think that was my 5-minute overview. So I will stop and hand it over to the next person.
All right, thank you, Tiffany.
Stan, yours might be a good transition if you don't mind being voluntold.
Sure, that's fine. Yeah, thanks. I'm Stan Zygmunt from the Department of Physics and Astronomy, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a overview of a tool that I use along with many others at the university called Top Hat. And we do this to try to increase student engagement in the classroom specifically. So Top Hat is a piece of software that has these features. This is cribbed directly from Top Hat's website. The ones that I'm going to focus on today are the ones that I use the most, but this does give you a sense of other features that Top Hat offers. I use it to take attendance every day. I use it for in-class polls and quizzes, and also to try to jumpstart discussions as well. So here's some features of Top Hat. It's a piece of software that the university has a site license for. So in other words, students can register for this for free, and then they can download an app that they can use on a tablet or laptop or their phones during class time. It's very streamlined way to keep attendance. It gives you polling opportunities with a variety of question types, and I'll show an example of that in just a few minutes. You can, although I don't do this myself, you can create assignments that you could administer through Top Hat. You can easily upload course material. Top Hat has its own comprehensive gradebook, which then can be integrated with an LMS like Blackboard, so that the scores, if you're using Top Hat and keeping track of student performance, it can be easily imported into Blackboard. So what's a Top Hat question look like? Well, here is an example of one that I gave in January in one of my introductory physics courses. And it's kind of a boring, not very exciting, but traditional multiple choice kind of question. And why do I want to do these things during class time? Well, it's really helpful for me to know how well students are absorbing the material, so that in real time, if there is clearly a misunderstanding or misconception, I can do something to try to address that. And so this is a quick way for me to give a simple question that if the students have understood what we've talked about so far, they can figure out the correct answer within about 30 seconds, maybe a minute at the outside. And then what you'll see here, since this is a question that I've already given, is this gives the result that happens after the students respond. But let me show you what this looks like in a real Top Hat session. So I've got am I sharing the screen? Did I ever share the screen?
No,
at the
you
beginning?
haven't. Sorry.
I did not. I am so sorry. Oh my goodness. Terrible. All right. Well, I will go back in a moment and show you a couple slides that I skipped.
Stan, we're losing your voice. Sorry, it sounds like chipmunks. I wonder if you need to go out and come back in. Gina, do you have a suggestion? You're our techie in the room. Does he need to leave the session and come back in to solve this problem?
How does it sound now?
Better.
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
I apologize. Something happened when I shared the screen, I believe.
Did.
I'm going to share it now and hopefully see if we can recover from this.
Right now you're sharing and your voice still sounds okay.
Okay. And can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. So what I wanted to show you was a Top Hat session that gives a pretty clear idea of what the instructor sees. So on the left-hand side are all the slides, including the questions that I am projecting on the screen in the classroom during class time. And so what I was starting to say earlier is that this gives me a chance to give questions that students should be able to answer with a minimum of time. 30 seconds, maybe 60 seconds is typically what I give for these kinds of questions. And here's an example of a conceptual question. An object is launched from level ground at an angle between 0 and 90 degrees above the horizontal. After being launched, the magnitude of the velocity of the object is which of the following? Which of the following is true? So in class, I would present this. And so here's what the students would see. I'd start the question. The timer, in this case, is set to 30 seconds. At various times in the semester, I might ask the students to discuss this in a small group and then make their selection. But after the time period, and in the bottom left-hand corner, you can see how many of the students who are registered for the course and connected on that particular day have answered it. So then when it times out, you'll get that little histogram that shows what their selections are. If you advance right here. And so you can see that there was a rather overwhelming consensus for one of the choices. And what's interesting about that is that choice turns out to be incorrect. And so this is the sort of thing that gives a learning opportunity in class where clearly there was a misconception. So what I believe I did at this point in class was to tell the students, hey, grab somebody next to you. And if they're sitting with people who they know, they do this pretty readily, and talk about this. And I may actually write something down on the board that will help clarify, for example, the magnitude of the velocity. There's an equation for that. And I'll write down what that equation is and ask them to talk about it. And then we can revote. You can do it again. So at that point, hopefully you reach some kind of a consensus that may reveal what the misconception was for the students. So that's the way Top Hat works. I have tended to use it as a way of assigning class participation credit. And there are various ways that you can weight the aspect of whether they participate simply by submitting an answer or whether they get the correct answer. Typically what I do is 80% of the credit goes to just answering the question. 20% is if they get it correct. And if we do it a second time, then they have a second opportunity to get the question correct. So it's a way of allowing the students, asking them to engage in the course material in real time in the class. And I find that using Top Hat, although this was just one simple example of how a Top Hat question would be administered, it makes my students more engaged. It can even be used by students who are attending class remotely. If someone's ill, they can actually, through the web, they can access what you're presenting in class, and they can respond to questions in real time the same way they would in the classroom. The anonymity of the system promotes participation. Like I said, I learn a lot about student misconceptions. Hopefully students can help one another address those, but I can also address them on the spot. The small group aspect of using Top Hat and encouraging people to talk about it together fosters learning. Using it every day, I find if I do that, then students don't complain about it. It just becomes part of the course and their expectations. And despite what I was just having problems with here a few minutes ago, the reliability of Top Hat itself is outstanding. In using it for 4 or 5 years now, I've never had a problem in class with something failing and losing the ability to use Top Hat. Sorry about the glitch there, but I hope that gives a little bit of an idea of what Top Hat can be used for in the classroom.
Okay, thank you very much, Dan. All right, then Mandy, you're up.
Awesome. So I too started struggling with figuring out how to entice students to engage in doing the reading. So basically it got to a point where I felt like my options, I use the term rage quizzing when you suspect students aren't reading, and then in your anger and desperation, you offer them a quiz on which most of them will earn a C or below. And I noticed that that doesn't entice students to read. And so they just become angry, and it doesn't ultimately solve the problem. And so I think it was my first summer here, well, pre-pandemic. So yeah, my summer 2019, I learned about Perusall, and it's taken a little bit for me to learn how it works well for me, but I'll share a bit of what I've learned along the way. So basically it happened kind of classic for humanities classes. Students weren't reading for class. And for whatever reason in the humanities, students think that they can fake it. And you can't. That's not how it works. I did try reading questions. They worked fine, but the gift of Perusall, what I really love about it is it's where the student conversations start taking shape. So it also is when reading the Bible academically, it's really important. Some students are very familiar and comfortable with the biblical narrative, but oftentimes what they share is what they learned in church, which is reading the Bible devotionally is a fine way to read the Bible. It's just not how we read the Bible in a Theo 200 course. So it enables me to give kind of gentle suggestions to students on reading in real time. I can also see where the class energy is. Students in this framework, it looks like a text box, and students can actually tag each other. They can tag me, they can upvote, they can ask questions. And so I'll share what it looks like. So the a couple of the benefits is talking about contentious topics. I can see student discussion taking shape about contentious topics. I also have noticed that it improves connection to previous class material. I don't know if any of you experience this, but sometimes students see classes writ large as hermetically sealed, so they may not carry over information from Theo 200 to the upper division. They also seem to see individual class periods as sealed, where they don't always transfer the information from one class to another. So first, on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, this is a class discussion that took shape. So over here, I can see where the students' discussions are. And this is what it looks like. This is a previous course. I'm not sure how to make the names go away, but students are able to ask questions. They're able to upvote questions. So you could see the students are tagging each other. You can see them talking about the ceasefire between Israel and Palestine. To make a comment, all students do is highlight text, and then a text box appears, and then they can type their question there. I asked students to make 10 comments per reading day. That tends to be about right for my classes. So back at it, I'll show an example of them connecting to previous class material. Let me see. So here, this is a student connecting to a previous class where it's talking about the Israelites are now enslaved. So this people group that are the keepers of the covenant with God are supposed to be kind of kept safe and protected. And then students are connecting this to the birth of three traditions, which was the class period before. So they're talking about entering a land that is already populated, that's been promised to you, but how do you deal with the people that are already there? And so I get to see students wrestling with it in the ancient framework, but I also get to see them wrestling with this in the modern framework, which is really interesting, especially seeing the students reading the Bible and engaging each other as they go through the course. So the comments are really great. This is a Theo 200 course. So these students have not read, and this is like 2 weeks into class. So every civilization has existed in history. One tribe clan has an issue. The group will immediately start defending itself without any rational reason. Why couldn't the Egyptians and Israelites live peacefully? They automatically assume that the Israelites are going to spread and conquer, which is really interesting in class, then placing it in conversation with our news cycle. If on the days that I'm feeling brave, I'm not feeling brave every day to do that. So then 1 second, I am struggling with my view here. All right. So another place, this is an example from an upper division class where I see students kind of changing their minds. I don't think I have a ton of time left, but in the Bible, there are letters that are ascribed to the Apostle Paul that scholars do not believe Paul actually wrote. And so in class, students watch a video. They can do video, you can do the Bible, you can do websites, you can do podcasts, and students comment in real time. So in this video about disputed letters, students said things like, how could you know that Paul didn't write these letters? How could you demonstrate that? And so then you see these examples where you get to see student reasoning and student engagement. So there's one critiquing the English, which is really hilarious. So they're trying to wrestle. They know that this letter is disputed, and they're trying to reason through how they got here. So perhaps Timothy is the real author, and Paul's name is the only name as a means of protection. Or maybe Timothy was the editor who made it all fancy, and the original letter was more basic. So the students are reasoning through who could have written these letters and why they would have written these letters, which is a deeply academic way of discussing the Bible. This is what scholars do. And the students kind of don't realize that what they're doing here is academic biblical interpretation. And in part, I kind of don't want them to realize that because it's so beautiful seeing them come to this. And then I can say in class, you all are doing this work, because a lot of times in theology, students are like, well, I'm not an expert. I'm an XYZ major. I can tell students no, actually, you're operating at a really high level. You also see student reasoning and student reactions. So in some cases, students will stick with what they've been taught from a devotional perspective. And you see that engaging in class too. So you kind of see the perspectives of class writ large before students ever enter the classroom. I think the main benefit of this is that students are invested in their reading. So in exchange for them reading this, I give students points. It seems to be the currency of the day. If I expect them to do it, if I expect them to value it, I need to value it with points. And so I offer students 5 points per day. Daily reading is 20% of their overall grade, because if they're reading this, it elevates the conversation. And frankly, it makes kind of everything better in terms of teaching. And what I've learned though, I used to think of readings as like the baseline for class, that class builds on them. But students have critiqued me in my end of semester evals that they don't engage these in class. So what I've learned with our students right now is if they read it, they want to talk about it. And I kind of, before I did Perusall, students kind of didn't want to talk about the readings because they hadn't done the readings. And now they're like mad that we're not talking about the readings in class, which is totally wild. I never thought that I would get critiqued on them wanting to talk about the readings in class. So it's really fun. And you get to see students being salty. I didn't share any active classes, but in a passage of Genesis, it talks about women having pains during childbirth. And one student's comment was, that didn't age well, which is just super fun. You can kind of see their personalities taking shape too.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Mandy.
My pleasure.
So now we're to the session where I'm going to ask the 3 presenters to talk to each other about what they just heard and ask questions.
Mandy, can you talk a little bit about how you upload one of the readings and how easy it is to get that into the format that Perusall needs?
Oh, Mandy, you're not mic'd.
I was trying to share screen and unmute at the same time. It went poorly. Here, I'll show you. Trying to keep the Zoom screen and everything on the same page is really throwing me for a loop. So I'll just go into my current class. If you go to library, you go to add content and then add in
Document from my
any
device,
materials.
for example. Yeah, if you had a PDF or something, yeah.
Yep. You can also copy course, much the same you can in Blackboard and I imagine Top Hat. So once readings have solidified in a course, you can use them again. I have source books that I created for students that are from Google Docs. The functionality is pretty fantastic.
Well, Mandy, before you leave that page,
Yeah.
that student upload folder, I know when I taught core, I use that. It's a way that students can actually upload their own pieces of writing for each other to look at and comment on in Perusall.
Oh, that's awesome. Did you do that for peer editing?
I did. Yeah.
That's a great idea. I like that.
Are the videos then stored in Perusall or are they linked to Perusall?
They are stored. So I have a video here. And if you click open, so the little dots are student comments as they're watching this video.
Oh,
and so the video is embedded here. It also integrates with Blackboard and other learning management systems. I have to relearn how to do it every semester, but I managed to figure it out and I am not super tech savvy. So if I can figure it out, honestly, anybody can. I have a question for Stan. I've heard about Top Hat, and how does it interface with Blackboard? Because I know like Starfish is embedded with Blackboard so they can see, advisor can see how many points students have. My main concern about Top Hat is I don't want to run 14 learning management systems all at the same time. So how does that work for you? Does it integrate with Starfish? Because I want to keep the connection so advisors can see student grades in real time, which is really valuable for retention.
it integrates with Blackboard, and the folks at Top Hat, the customer service is really very helpful. If you let them know a couple weeks ahead of time, for example, that you want to set your course up, they will they'd be very willing to help with any and every task. But once you sync your course with the LMS, there's just you do it through Top Hat, and then you give Top Hat your Blackboard credentials, and then what it does for you is it creates an additional module within your course that then now you do have to manually go into Top Hat and click a button that says sync with Blackboard or sync with LMS. And so it'll take whatever the current score then is of all the students, and automatically it'll appear in Blackboard. So if once you get that set up at the beginning of the semester, it's not a problem.
I have a couple follow-up questions about that. So you said you use Top Hat for attendance. Does it sync with the attendance feature in Blackboard? Because there is like an attendance feature in Blackboard itself.
I don't know the answer to that, Tiffany. I've only used Top Hat to do the attendance tracking, and it's their grade book is really pretty simple. You will occasionally get complaints, if I could just so I don't know the answer to that attendance question. I've never used the attendance feature in Blackboard because of this. So but you will have students occasionally say, oh, I submitted my answer, but it or my screen froze or something like that. And it's very easy to go into Top Hat and change a score if you want to be merciful that way. And so there is some editing that has to be done within the gradebook, but it's really easy to do that.
The other question I had was about the actual problems that you're using with Top Hat. So are you writing all of your own questions? Are there Top Hat problem banks that you can pull from?
I'm writing all of my own. And I believe that, Top Hat does have some resources that are integrated within it that you can pull from, but I just haven't explored that because I've got a group of questions that I've been using for years and years, and I add new ones and modify them, but I have not explored that.
I have a question actually for Tiffany regarding the Open WebWork. So, and I'll apologize. I tried to go to the link, the Open WebWork link, and it says openwebwork.org is not working. And so something on their end. So I might have been able to answer my own question, but I couldn't. So the Open WebWork seems like it's a framework for homework questions. And then, but you showed a textbook, and that was also open source, the freely available, it seemed. Are those somehow embedded in Open WebWork, or is it where the textbook is separate and then the problems are taken from the textbook and put then in Open WebWork? I just didn't understand that.
It can be both. So WebWork allows people to create any problem. And so there are lots of homework problems that have already been created WebWork for a lot of the common textbooks. Okay. So like Stewart's the published textbook that we used to use, before we switched to OER. So there's like Stewart problems in WebWork. I'm not sure how the licensing agreement works for when you're doing that. Sure. But yeah, a lot of the common textbooks, people have already developed WebWork problems. But then there's also just, you can find problem sets for topics. If you want to look at, chain rule derivative, taking derivatives using chain rule, you can search there and you can pull up huge problem banks, by the topic.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you.
I think at this point we can go to open questions for anybody, but I do have a couple. Stan, I think I understand that the university supports Top Hat. Can you say how that works? Because I know for Tiffany, the WebWorks, there's a charge $25 per student. And if you covered this at the top, I'm sorry, I missed.
It's okay. I think I said something about it, but the university has a site license for it. So they pay a fee every year that allows anyone with a valpo.edu email address to sign up for free. So of course, there's never any charge for faculty to set up the instructor account, but students can just register really quickly, and you have them register their student ID so that it'll sync properly with the gradebook. But but apart from that, and then Top Hat provides its own app, which works really well on a phone.
And there's a question in the chat. Is that the same for Perusall, Mandy?
Sorry, I missed that. I was looking at Top Hat to
Talking
see if
about,
it could integrate attendance.
things that cost something and things that don't.
Perusall is free. You could purchase textbooks within Perusall and request textbooks if they don't have them. I've never used that function. All of my stuff is either OER or created outside of that framework. But there's no cost for Perusall, and it's been that way. I've been using it for, oh gosh, Cindy, do you remember when we started using it?
At least 8 years ago or more.
Yeah.
And I think I can say this much, that it was created by a professor, a physics professor
At Harvard, yeah.
at Harvard, for the same reason that you talked about. He was seeing that his students weren't doing the reading. And he said, how can I create something online that will get them doing the reading, get them, enacting with the reading? And he didn't want it to cost anything. So this is a professor who created it for other professors and said, I don't want to make a profit on this. I want everybody to benefit. Yeah. Bob.
So the question for Stan, will you
Okay.
walk us through how you actually implement the attendance feature in a class? So a bunch of students show up for class. Tell us how you go
Sure.
about it. What do they
Yeah,
do? How
I'll
do you
just-
keep kids that aren't there from doing, what do you do?
Yeah, I'll try to demonstrate that. So
Cool.
here, let me share my screen. This is what I forgot to do at the outset of the presentation. So if I do this correctly, you will be able to see my
See it?
Top Hat window here.
Yep.
Okay, so if I present here, there's a take attendance option. So I take attendance, and then there's a 4-digit code that's generated randomly, right? So the students who are sitting in the classroom, they see this code, they enter that into Top Hat on their app, and then their attendance is recorded. And what I usually do is minimize this and keep it open after the class has begun, because someone who walks in 3 minutes late, can still register their attendance. I usually write this code down on the board so that after we move on in class, it's still available for them. And I haven't had any real problem with that. Now, just to be clear, I don't give any credit for attendance per se, but of course, if you attend, and I'm usually giving anywhere from 3 to 10 questions during a typical class period, by responding, you'll be getting the credit that you're supposed to get for classroom attendance. But this also works remotely. So, if there's a student who's sick and I'm streaming my class and they want to register their attendance, they can see this code as well, and they're engaged. They're attending even though they're doing it remotely.
Okay, so to follow on that then, Stan,
Sure.
but if you were giving attendance credit for attendance and the numbers up on the screen, somebody could potentially, if they had an electronic device,
Right.
they could text that number to a friend.
Correct.
And
They could, but what's going to happen, like I said, I'm not giving credit for attendance.
yeah,
I give credit for their response to the questions that I give. So the attendance is really mostly for my benefit. I can then review and say, really quickly through the grade book, I can see that, Fred has been there 25 out of 27 times, so I'm not worried about him, but somebody else has missed the last 5 classes. And so I can see that at a glance through the grade book.
So with the survey questions, it's sort of a 1-2 punch. You get them that, and then you get them to acquiesce and say, I'm here. And then through the response to the questions, that's how you know.
Right. That's how I know. Exactly.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, because they could show up and be there and not respond to any of the questions. And that's what happened to me before Top Hat was around. There used to be these physical clicker systems where students either would purchase or the department would have available, or IT would make available these clicker units that the students physically had. And of course, there were all sorts of problems with those. But the problem at the time was I was just using it for diagnostic purposes, and it was not easy to keep track of scores with that old system. So I didn't give any credit. And I found pretty quickly that in a class of maybe 40 students, I was only getting 20 or 25 to respond, even though all 40 were there, right?
Yeah.
But like Mandy pointed out, if you assign points to it, they're generally going to respond. And I'd much rather have them engage that way, even though, you know, it might seem a little odd to give points for these things. I've just decided that's worth it, and I think it is.
Thanks.
I have a question about Perusall and it linking to Blackboard. So does it go within Blackboard, like students go to their Blackboard course and then Perusall is there?
Yes. So a student, once you integrate it with the learning management system, Perusall will populate a link that says Perusall on the left-hand menu of Blackboard. And as you create the content model, you'll select that this is an LTI provider. And then from there, so you create the web resource and then it'll appear there. If students use that link the first time, they're automatically enrolled in Perusall. You can do Perusall outside of Blackboard. You can just create the class independently and then provide students with the course code. I've done it that way before. I like the integration with Blackboard, I think the best. And so then I hyperlink the readings into Blackboard the same way that I would link readings any other way. So it's a bit clunky to get set up, but once it's set up between Perusall and Blackboard, it's pretty easy to continue the course.
Okay, and then is there somebody on campus that is an expert in Perusall? I mean, other than you, who would help us get set up for the first time if we need that kind of help?
I think Cindy wears that crown.
I could do that.
You
I
could?
used it in core for a few years. Yeah.
Okay.
But I'm
Great.
also happy to help. I mean, whatever, like, I think this tech is really great. For me in my class, it really works.
Okay, thank you.
Stan, there's a question for you in the chat. And
Okay.
it's, how do you determine that students have consumed all the readings in Top Hat and aren't just answering the questions?
Consumed all the readings. I guess I'm not sure what that means. I do assign a pre-class reading assignment and also a video that I have created, which is me talking over some PowerPoint slides. They're assigned those to read and watch before class. And then I give them a simple 5-question multiple choice quiz that could be administered through Top Hat, but since they're already on Blackboard, to see those things, I do it through Blackboard. So that's a pre-class quizzing system. And so in Top Hat, what I generally do, I use Top Hat as a way of uploading all the slides I'm going to show during class and these questions that I'll be posing during the class period. So I'm, in class, even though my slides were created with PowerPoint, I'm displaying them through Top Hat. And those stay in Top Hat. So then Top Hat becomes the place where students go after class in order to access whatever materials were presented during class time. And then the questions that they've answered during class time, after class is over, I can assign them to the students so they can go back and use them as practice questions. Even though they've already answered them and gotten credit for doing so, they can go back and use those as practice questions before a quiz or an exam. Does that help?
How do you deal with, that question came from me.
Okay.
So how do you deal with students who come to class and they answer those 5 questions? They get the answers from their friends through text on their cell phone or something like that, and they have not looked through your slides, they have not watched your videos. Can you identify that in Top Hat?
That's more difficult for them to do, because the quizzes that I administer on Blackboard, I randomize the question order and then the choices within each question. So it could be done, you're right, but it would be a significant amount of effort. And based on the scores that I see in that, I don't suspect that that's happening a lot. So there are just some tools within Blackboard that you can use to make that more laborious than it would be otherwise for the students.
Tiffany, there's a question for you in the chat. I don't know if you've read it yet.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So yeah, our department definitely does, convey to students that we have chosen to use OER resources. I think that, students, I think, are appreciative knowing that you've purposely chosen the resources in order to save them money. And I would say I wasn't sure also part of that question was like, within our department or to the students. I would say like part of our department making that commitment was we had gotten a couple of the OER grants from the library, and we decided to just split that among all our faculty members. So we gotten some grant and then had some additional funding, and we basically one semester gave every single faculty member in our department $500 and said everybody is tasked with, for all of their courses, find OERs. And so it really was a department commitment for all of us to switch to using that. I would say that there are a few exceptions of courses that we don't use it for. One of them is Math 110, 111, 115. Those are the remedial courses. For those courses, we're using ALEX software, which is more expensive. There's an access code they have to purchase. But we've been trying to switch the access codes to try to save students money. So we had an access code before that came with more bells and whistles the students weren't actually using. And so this past spring, we switched to a different access code that had more of the minimum functionality in ALEX, and told the students, okay, like we're trying to save you money, we're trying to get the access code that's the cheapest possible. And because our ALEX access code for that course now has less of the bells and whistles, we've curated some like YouTube videos that used to be like videos that were already in ALEX, but now we've curated free YouTube videos for a lot of the topics that then we can share with students to help supplement that. So yeah, it's definitely something that we do try to convey to students, that we're trying to, make it as economical as possible for them.
Yeah, I was meaning for other faculty. I think when I first started thinking about OERs, I was like, how do you do that? That's not trained in graduate school. You're trained how to find a book and assign a book and divide up the chapters. And so I think it would be awesome to have the math department. I would love to see the math department promote it and what you've seen and learned about it as a department, to maybe build other departments to test out the same thing and to kind of build that courage of, yes, there are many other ways to have access to information.
And I don't know if maybe math has more OERs than other fields. I haven't done, research for that, but I'd say mathematicians in general, I think, tend to have a lot of their stuff for free available. So I'd say for math, it's been pretty easy for us, just because, for any math course, we've been able to find an OER that's, just as good as what the print version was.
Tiffany, I want to ask, I think you alluded to this, that some students have barriers with this method, but I wonder if that's changing. Are you finding that more and more when they come here that they've actually had some OERs in high school? Or has that not really changed?
I think they're more used to having like online homework than they used to. So before we had switched to web work for our math classes, we were using WebAssign. WebAssign was an expensive one, whereas web work is free. And back when we were using WebAssign, we would have, that was part of our transition. We used to have, they would just write their homework problems on paper and, hand them in. There was a lot of, I think, student complaints when we first switched to online homework because they didn't have the physical record. I think that was one of the biggest complaints students had, is, when they had physical homework and they would turn it in, those were problems coming from a textbook. So when they had a traditional textbook, they had, problems they were doing from the textbook. You had that physical record of what you were doing. And so when we switched to using the online system, you no longer have as much of that, physical record of your homework. Your homework's now just, done online. Then we switched to web work, which is more the OER. I think by the time we did that switch, it was, more post-COVID, and I don't know, there were no more complaints about, having homework online rather than, using a physical textbook with physical, paper homework assignments.
Makes sense. Yeah. Mandy, I want to ask you a question, since I've used Perusall for core. Do you sometimes find that the online discussion, so they're online commenting on the text, and then they're reading each other's comments and commenting on the comments and having a conversation there, do you sometimes find that those conversations are different from the ones that take place in the classroom?
I found like the classroom discussions tend to be a little more stilted. Students are a little more afraid to say what they think. And as you could see, like the Palestinian-Israeli conflict is pretty divisive. And students engage with the respect we expect from our students, but they will engage across difference more readily than in face-to-face conversations. So in class, there's always, even the pair, share, square, whatever, cube thing. I do that regularly, but it's not as effective as the organic pair, share, square happening in Perusall. Have you found, is that consistent with your experience?
It is. And one thing is the quieter students will sometimes post really interesting multiple things online, and then they really won't talk in class.
Mhm.
So, and for me, it was a great way to see the involvement of the quieter students. And I felt like, great, because I'm giving you credit for Perusall, even if you don't much talk in class.
Mhm.
So
In Top Hat, I'll just mention that it allows for open-ended questions where you're not going to give, there's no multiple choice set of responses. You can just throw a question out and then give them 30 seconds to type out an answer. And then you see them just sort of as a collection of individual answers, but they're not associated with a particular student. And that could be a way of jumpstarting some discussion because it's anonymous, the way that those responses are given. Of course, it could blow up in your face too. I don't know, but the anonymity could give rise to some rather intemperate things too.
I think it is helpful, especially in theology. Students come into theology with fears. Like students are, from wherever they come, they're worried that I'm going to like convert them to my particular brand of moving through the world. Just so y'all know, that's not what happens in theology courses. If I had that power, I would capitalize on it. Absolutely. I'd bust out this popsicle stand. So it helps students not be as afraid to engage across difference. But mind control, right? They don't teach you that in PhD land. They don't.
yeah.
We can't even control our own minds.
Stan, I want to ask about something you brought up. You talked about that from doing these pollings, you can see misconceptions, so maybe you're chagrined that like, wow, like 60% of them got the same wrong answer.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, I get excited when that happens. So
well, okay. And certainly in the moment you can figure out ways to have them talk to each other and stuff about that. But I guess I'm wondering, does that change the way you teach? Do you go back and say, I think I got to present this topic a little differently?
Totally changes the way I teach. I mean, it's a little scary because you may have everything all planned for what you're going to do that day, and you find out 10 minutes into class that there's something that you thought was so clear and transparent that they don't understand. So you have to be able to pivot. It's a little bit like working without a net on the trapeze, but it's more dynamic, and you get a sense that you're really helping them get past a certain sticking point. And different wrong answers, if you come up with a good multiple choice question, different wrong answers reveal different misconceptions. They're not just all either right or wrong. They're wrong in different ways. So the best part is when you see that bar chart and there's like 2 or 3 answers that were all given by a pretty good chunk of the class, because then you really can motivate them to talk to one another. And if you do it again, okay, now I have a second chance to try. I can talk to my neighbor and see if we can figure it out together. And I really enjoy that.
Well, we're going to end a little early so that people have a break before the next session. But is there any burning final question that anybody has for any of our panelists? Nope. Okay. I'll just remind you that because this session was recorded, I will, within a day or two, be sending that recording to all of you. So if you want to go back and rewatch some sections, you can do that. So thank you all. Thanks, Stan and Mandy and Tiffany, for taking some time out of your summer to present. And I think you got some people excited about using some of these tools. So thanks very much.